Okay, let's unpack this. In a world that's just overflowing with health trends, all these new diets, and honestly, a lot of conflicting advice, what if the most powerful blueprint for wellness has actually been right in front of us for thousands of years, kind of hidden in plain sight? This deep dive, it's all about challenging a lot of the conventional wisdom surrounding some of the most debated foods today. Things like red meat, bread, and dairy. You might actually be quite surprised to learn what ancient wisdom, particularly when we look at it through the lens of biblical principles, categorizes as not just good, but, well, ultimate health foods.
Yeah. And what's really fascinating here is we're going to explore how a diet, or maybe more accurately, a dietary philosophy, rooted in these timeless principles might offer a really transformative path, protecting health, longevity, even healing. It kind of moves beyond these fleeting fads, the diet of the month club, and embraces a plan that has, well, it's transcended millennia. And this really raises a compelling question for all of us, doesn't it? Can returning to this kind of ancient dietary wisdom actually unlock profound health benefits right here in our incredibly modern world?
Exactly. So we'll guide you through some specific insights, what was eaten, what was avoided, and maybe most importantly, why, hopefully providing some of those aha moments that could maybe radically change your perspective on just everyday eating. It certainly sparked my curiosity about how deep these ideas go.
Yeah, mine too. There's a lot to unpack.
So let's get right into it, because the framework we're exploring today.
Well, it offers a perspective that genuinely challenges almost everything we commonly hear about eating well these days. Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. A particularly compelling aspect of this deep dive is how it directly confronts that conventional dietary wisdom we just mentioned. The understanding presented in this ancient framework suggests that, well, if you view these ancient scriptures as containing profound, maybe even divine wisdom, then the whole assertion that foods like red meat, bread, and dairy are inherently unhealthy for a human being, that gets challenged head on.
Right. It's not just challenged, it's almost flipped on its head. Because these texts often present these exact foods as the ultimate health food and delicacy. That's a pretty stark contrast to, many contemporary dietary recommendations we hear all the time.
It really is. It's not just saying they're okay or permissible or even just good for you. They're often portrayed as fundamentally optimal. Optimal for human health, for vitality. It's a complete reframe of how we usually talk about these foods. And to connect this to the broader picture, the philosophy we're digging into proposes a really distinct approach to eating and living. We've kind of nicknamed it the Biblio Diet. It rhymes with paleo. But the key difference is Biblio refers fundamentally to the book, these ancient texts.
Right, the book.
And this dietary framework, it really stands apart from many modern approaches, including, like the paleo diet, for example. Now, that particular diet, when you look at it through the lens of this ancient wisdom, is often seen as, well, presupposing millions, maybe even billions of years of human evolution, sometimes linking human development to, ape lineage and how our colons evolved and things like that.
Okay.
The Biblio diet, on the other hand, aligns more with a belief in human creation by a divine hand, operating within what's considered a more normal timeline, or maybe a more traditional historical understanding. So the core message here is often framed as this kind of profound choice for you, the individual.
A choice between,
Well, you can follow the world's latest dietary trends, the fads that come and go. You can follow a specific influencer, someone charismatic online. Or the third option presented is you can choose to follow principles that are understood to have originated from a divine source and have, well, endured for thousands of years. It's really presented as a foundational decision about where you place your trust for health guidance.
that's a really powerful framing. And to understand the full scope of this, it's important, isn't it, to realize that the Biblio Diet isn't just a list of eat this, not that.
Not at all.
This ancient wisdom presents it as a truly comprehensive approach. It's sometimes called bibliomedicine, and that encompasses way more than just what's on your plate. It integrates a biblio mindset and even something called biblio movement.
Right, it's holistic.
Exactly. It offers insights described as the secrets to some really profound health outcomes, not just living longer, but things like mastering your metabolism, fighting depression, reducing pain, even, they claim, conquering cancer. The underlying conviction driving this whole approach seems to be this belief that a higher power will ultimately gain glory for a health revival that, from this perspective, is sort of expected or prophesied to happen.
The idea being that great health was his idea to begin with.
Yeah, suggesting that optimal wellness isn't just something we want, but maybe part of a deeper, divine design that we can rediscover and embrace today. It definitely gives you a different lens to look through when you think about your well-being.
Okay, now let's dive into some of those specific foods where this ancient wisdom really challenges what many of us have been taught. Dairy seems like a perfect starting point. It's a food often considered, pretty problematic in contemporary health discussions. Absolutely. And what's truly fascinating when we look at dairy through this ancient lens is that the critical difference, the thing often overlooked in modern discourse, seems to lie in two main types of milk protein, A1 and A2 beta casein.
A1 and A2.
Yeah. And the understanding presented here suggests that A1 beta casein is actually believed to be the result of a genetic mutation, likely a consequence of selective breeding practices going back centuries.
Selective breeding. How so?
Well, particularly prevalent with Holstein cows.
Hmm.
The classic black and white dairy cow. Sometimes people jokingly call them the Chick-fil-A cow because they're everywhere in the U.S. dairy industry. These cows were quite deliberately favored because they produce huge volumes of milk. It was really about maximizing production, maybe not necessarily about optimizing nutritional benefit for humans.
Quantity over quality, potentially.
You could say that. Now, here's the kicker. When A1 milk is digested, it breaks down into a specific peptide called BCM7. That stands for beta-casomorphin 7, and BCM7 is, believe it or not, an opioid.
An opioid from milk?
Yes. It means it can interact with the body's opioid receptors. And the research explored in this framework suggests that consuming A1 dairy could be profoundly impactful for some people. Some analyses even indicate it could be, get this, 6 times more harmful than gluten for individuals who are sensitive. Wow, 6 times more harmful than gluten. That's a huge claim.
It is. And it's not made lightly. It's attributed to the opioid excitatory response that BCM7 can trigger. And its effects are actually compared to what certain gluten proteins, like gliadin, can do in the gut and even the nervous system.
So it affects more than just digestion.
Potentially, yes. Some interpretations of older diagnostic observations for conditions we now recognize as things like celiac disease weren't just about stomach upset. They apparently noted things like night terrors and erratic behavior in children, which some now interpret as maybe a manifestation of this opiate-like response impacting neurological function.
That's fascinating. So what are the common symptoms for people sensitive to this A1 protein? Well, they can be really wide-ranging and often quite debilitating for those affected. We're talking everything from a persistent runny nose, that post-nasal drip thing, to uncomfortable gas and bloating. Also joint pain, noticeable mood changes, even poor sleep quality. And the really significant issue for us today, especially in the U.S., is its near ubiquity. A1 beta-casein permeates almost all of U.S. dairy, whether it's conventional or even most organic sources. Makes it tricky to avoid.
Okay, so that's A1. What's the story with A2?
So A2 beta-casein is presented as the original, the ancestral milk protein. This is the form that's naturally found in human mother's milk, actually. And it's in the milk of almost every mammal out there, with the really notable exception being those specific breeds of modern U.S. dairy cows that were bred for mass production.
So historically, people would have consumed A2 milk.
Almost certainly. The livestock consumed by revered figures mentioned in ancient texts, people like Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, King David, Solomon, even Jesus. Their cows, goats, sheep, whatever they had, would have produced A2 milk. And this distinction, which is often completely missed in modern nutritional debates, is highlighted as a major factor in dairy's fundamental tolerability and digestibility for a huge number of people.
So wait, this suggests that many people who think they're lactose intolerant or just sensitive to dairy.
Exactly. They might actually be reacting to the A1 protein, not necessarily lactose or dairy itself. It's a different mechanism. This historical and genetic perspective really reframes that whole modern dairy debate, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Okay, so practically speaking then, if someone wants to incorporate dairy back into their diet, maybe drawing on this ancient wisdom, what's the recommended path forward?
Well, the primary advice is to actively look for products that are explicitly labeled A2 if you're consuming cow's milk. That label is becoming more common.
Look for the A2 label.
Yes. Or even better, this wisdom suggests opting for dairy from goat, sheep, or water buffalo. These animals naturally produce A2 milk. You'll often find these options in things like certain cheeses, goat cheese, sheep's milk feta, water buffalo mozzarella, or in yogurts, or even liquid milk alternatives in health food stores.
And what about quality? Like organic grass-fed?
Absolutely crucial. The optimal choice, according to this perspective, would definitely be organic grass-fed A2 dairy. And ideally, if you can find it and are comfortable with it, raw, uncasteurized varieties are often championed. The belief is they retain more natural enzymes and beneficial bacteria that can aid digestion.
Right. Raw milk is a whole other conversation, but I see the principle. What about people who are maybe hesitant, who've had bad reactions before?
Good question. For those just starting to reintroduce dairy, or who know they've had sensitivities, it's often suggested to start slowly. Maybe begin with easily digestible forms first, like butter or ghee. Ghee, in particular, has most of the milk solids removed. Then, if that goes well, maybe move towards more complex products, like cheese or yogurt. This gradual approach lets the body adapt.
And it helps figure out if it's an A1 issue or maybe still a lactose issue, right?
Precisely. They're considered separate challenges. And this distinction also helps explain a global phenomenon. Dairy consumed in many parts of the world, India, Africa, the Middle East, is predominantly A2, which might explain why people from those regions can often handle dairy perfectly fine in their home countries, but then struggle when they move to places like the US where A1 is dominant.
That makes so much sense. I've heard people say that before.
Yeah, and if you look back at the ancient texts, there are specific references supporting dairy's value. Things like goat milk for your maidens and for your health. Figures like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are portrayed as nomadic peoples, and dairy would have been a huge part of their sustenance. King David is even recorded bringing curd and butter to the Israeli army. These weren't just incidental foods,
They were staples, valued.
deeply valued,
Yeah.
integral parts of their diet, signifying both sustenance and, importantly, robust health.
Okay, moving on to another food that's often right in the crosshairs of modern dietary controversy. It's fascinating, isn't it, how in stark contrast to so much of today's health advice, red meat is consistently deemed the ultimate health food and delicacy within these ancient wisdom traditions.
It really is striking.
It's not just presented as good or, acceptable. It's elevated to this ultimate status. That designation itself speaks volumes about its perceived value, its nutritional importance, and maybe even its spiritual significance back then. It definitely invites us to consider a radically different perspective than the one we usually get from, say, mainstream media today.
Absolutely. And this high regard for red meat isn't just a one-off mention. It's repeatedly evident throughout the ancient narratives. Think about that really profound act where Abraham feeds the fatted calf to angelic visitors. This is right before the whole Sodom and Gomorrah event.
The fatted calf, right?
That wasn't just any animal. The fatted calf represented a prized offering, the best of the best. It was a symbol of abundance, honor, the highest form of hospitality. It signifies a food of exceptional quality and implicitly nutritional richness.
And it shows up again, doesn't it?
It does. In that incredibly powerful parable of the prodigal son, the return is celebrated with the fatted calf, again, representing the greatest possible celebration and restoration. So this wasn't just about cultural preference. It profoundly highlights red meat as a highly valued food for health, for vitality, and for the most significant occasions.
Okay, so those are powerful examples. What else?
Well, consider King Solomon. He's described in these texts as the wisest man on earth, right? Renowned for immense wisdom, extraordinary wealth. And the records of his daily provisions, like in 1 Kings 4, explicitly mention red meat as part of his daily sustenance.
Every day.
The text implies it was a regular, significant part of the royal provisions. And the implication within this wisdom framework is pretty clear. If the wisest, wealthiest man on earth consumed red meat regularly, it was likely considered not just a luxury, but optimal for health, optimal for sustenance, for maintaining his extraordinary mental and physical capacities.
That perspective definitely offers a strong critique, then, of modern organizations, maybe even some faith-based ones, that advise against red meat consumption.
Exactly. From this viewpoint, that kind of advice is seen as fundamentally not true when you measure it against the consistent wisdom embedded in these ancient texts. It really compels us to ask why our modern views diverge so dramatically from these deeply ingrained historical dietary patterns.
Yeah, why the disconnect?
Well, building on that, the ancient wisdom concerning red meat isn't just about if you eat it, but implicitly it's also about its quality and maybe even its preparation. Now, the texts don't usually detail every single aspect like how the animals were raised,
Sure.
but the context of nomadic and early agricultural societies strongly suggests animals that were, free-ranging, primarily grass-fed, raised without modern antibiotics or hormones. That kind of environment would naturally produce a leaner, more nutrient-dense meat, richer in vital vitamins, minerals, healthy fats, things often lacking in conventionally raised animals today.
Okay, so the type of red meat matters.
Immensely. When modern dietary guidelines critique red meat, they often lump everything together, or focus specifically on industrially processed versions like cured meats, or meat from animals raised in confined, unnatural conditions, CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations. And those conditions significantly alter the nutritional profile and the potential health impact of the meat.
So the argument is the problem isn't red meat itself.
That's the perspective, yes. The problem is seen as the degradation of its quality and how it's produced in the modern industrial system. This leads to a critical distinction. The ultimate health food, described in ancient times, might bear very little resemblance to the mass-produced red meat that forms the basis of many contemporary health warnings. It's really a call to reevaluate which red meat we're actually talking about when we have these discussions.
Okay, let's pivot now to bread. Another staple that, much like red meat, is often, well, vilified in today's low-carb, gluten-conscious world. Yet, what we discover when we look into these ancient narratives is that bread holds this profoundly central, almost sacred place in the diet.
It really does.
I mean, a revered figure like Jesus himself is even referred to metaphorically as the bread of life. That alone underscores its fundamental importance, way beyond just simple physical sustenance.
This symbolism, plus its constant presence in daily life described in the text, it really forces us to re-examine our modern assumptions about this ancient staple, doesn't it?
Absolutely. When you look at the historical and biblical context, the sheer omnipresence of bread is just undeniable. Jesus is depicted eating bread and fish, throughout his life, even after his resurrection, and famously at the Last Supper, sharing dipped bread.
Right, the dipping the bread incident.
These accounts really solidify bread's role as a core staple, integral to daily life and even sacred rituals. And ancient scriptures consistently imply bread is fundamental, almost assumed, for sustenance. Think about that profound saying, man cannot live on bread alone.
Yeah, people quote that all the time. But notice, it doesn't say man shouldn't eat bread. It implies bread is expected for life, but that life also requires more than just physical nourishment. It acknowledges bread's foundational role. We also find stories of disciples eating grains right out of the field, showing how accessible and integrated it was.
Like a natural part of the landscape and diet.
Exactly. And furthermore, two major ancient feasts specifically celebrated the grain harvest things like the barley harvest or Yom HaVikarim, the Feast of First Fruits. This deep connection to the harvest, it symbolically ties into concepts like Jesus being the first fruits, demonstrating bread's deep cultural, nutritional, and spiritual significance. It was huge.
Okay, but here's the big question, isn't it? The bread they ate back then versus the bread we eat today.
Ah, yes. Here's where it gets absolutely crucial to understand the difference. Because the bread consumed in ancient times was profoundly different from the industrialized loaf most of us know today. For starters, the ancient grains themselves were distinct. They primarily consumed things like einkorn wheat. Yeah, it's an ancient variety. It's characterized by a more yellowish hue, significantly less gluten content than modern wheat, and also a lower sugar or carbohydrate profile overall. These grains were described as very different from today's hybridized varieties, which have been selectively bred over centuries, mostly for yield, pest resistance, and properties that suit industrial baking.
Okay, different grains. What about how they prepared it?
Also key, huge difference. The preparation methods were vital to its nutritional value. Grains were likely milled fresh, probably daily or very regularly.
Which preserves nutrients better?
Much better. Makes them more nutrient-dense than flour that's been sitting around, potentially stripped and bleached, like much of what we find today. And critically, these grains were also typically sprouted first.
Sprouted, like sprouted grain bread we see now.
Exactly, but it was likely the standard practice. Sprouting unlocks nutrients and makes them more digestible. And they were fermented in the sourdough process, often for a long time, maybe even up to 72 hours.
Wow, a 3-day fermentation.
Yeah. This traditional fermentation process, often driven by wild, naturally occurring yeasts, remember, nomadic lifestyles meant yeast was literally in the air, would have broken down complex carbohydrates and, importantly, gluten. This made the bread far more digestible and the nutrients more bioavailable.
So the sourdough process fundamentally changed the bread.
Absolutely. And another critical point, these ancient grains weren't sprayed with harsh modern chemicals like glyphosate, which a lot of contemporary research suggests can have really detrimental effects on gut health. The end result of all this, the ancient grain, the fresh milling, the sprouting, the long fermentation, was a pretty darn nutrient-dense food, often described as being dense and substantial, almost like a brick, Not like the light, fluffy stuff we often see today. It was real sustenance.
Okay, so it was completely different food,
Yeah.
essentially.
In many ways, yes. Which brings us to the modern challenges and solutions. In our world today, with all the digestive sensitivities people experience, while completely eliminating grains might still be necessary for some individuals with severely compromised guts, say autoimmune conditions, inflammatory bowel disease.
Right. For some people, it's just off the table.
For some, yes. But this ancient wisdom suggests that for many others, properly prepared bread, like sprouted or even true sourdough bread, could actually be incredibly beneficial. The current revolution in sourdough that we're seeing, it's kind of a rediscovery, isn't it? A societal return to these ancient, healthier practices, recognizing the profound benefits of natural fermentation.
It really feels like that.
And the core issue, as we learn from this perspective, is that modern grains have largely been selectively bred for all the wrong reasons. Specifically, they've often been engineered to increase gluten content.
Why would they do that?
Well, higher gluten helps the dough stick together better, gives it elasticity, makes it easier for industrial processing, and creates that texture many people expect now. But often, this comes at the cost of nutritional integrity and digestibility. So this overprocessed, often chemically treated, genetically altered modern bread is just a far cry from the life-sustaining staff of life celebrated in ancient texts. Understanding that distinction is absolutely key if you want to potentially reclaim bread's place in a healthy diet.
Okay, so we've explored how this ancient wisdom reframes our understanding of staples like dairy, red meat, and bread. Let's now turn to what this tradition describes as, I love this phrase, God's medicine cabinet. And we'll start with honey, a food often seen today merely as, a sweetener, maybe a slightly better alternative to sugar, but these texts seem to elevate it way beyond that to an ultimate healing compound.
They absolutely do. Honey's significance in these texts is profound, and it weaves through many ancient narratives. Perhaps the most famous example is the description of the Promised Land, that powerful symbol of abundance, blessing, divine provision. It's consistently referred to as the land of milk and honey.
Right, milk and honey.
That's not just poetic language or a casual description. It signifies a land overflowing with natural bounty, fertility, health. The presence of both rich milk, which, based on our earlier discussion, we'd understand as A2 dairy, and abundant honey points to an environment seen as designed for optimal human flourishing. Where healthy lands naturally produce these incredibly nourishing and healing foods, it really sets honey apart, doesn't it? As a symbol of life, sweetness, and divine goodness, far beyond just being a sugar substitute.
It really does. So what are the specifics? What makes honey so special from this perspective?
Well, when we delve into the world of honey, this ancient wisdom, which is increasingly supported by modern insights, reveals its profound and varied forms. Each offers unique benefits. Take raw, unheated, and locally sourced honey, for instance.
Local raw honey, yeah.
It's highly praised for its potential to help alleviate seasonal allergies. The idea is that because it naturally collects trace amounts of pollen and botanicals from your specific area, it acts almost like a natural immunotherapy or homeopathic remedy, helping your body build tolerance.
Interesting. Like microdosing local pollen.
Sort of, yeah. And beyond just local raw honey, there are specific therapeutic varieties that get highlighted, like Manuka honey from New Zealand or Melipona honey from South America. These are renowned for their really potent antimicrobial properties. We're even hearing discussions now about new discoveries, like a potential better than Manuka honey coming out of Madagascar.
So they actually fight microbes.
Yes, they possess remarkable abilities to combat pathogens. They're seen as powerful agents in a natural medicine cabinet, often used traditionally for things like wound healing and boosting immune support. But the benefits extend beyond just the liquid honey itself.
Oh, like what else?
Well, the honeycomb, for starters, often discarded today, right?
Yeah.
But it's considered good for the bones because it contains amino acids. Plus, it provides natural sweetness and sustained energy. Then there's propolis.
Propolis, right. Bees make that.
Exactly. It's that resinous substance bees collect. And it's highlighted in this wisdom as one of those underutilized forms of medicine that's described as an ultimate immune modulator, meaning it helps balance the immune system, potentially very effective for supporting immunity generally, and maybe even for managing autoimmune conditions.
Immune modulator.
Yeah.
Okay. What else is in the hive?
Royal jelly, the potent food that's fed exclusively to the queen bee. It's revered for anti-aging and longevity properties. It's considered a powerful yin tonic in traditional Chinese medicine, and specifically championed in some wellness circles as maybe the greatest anti-aging compound for females.
Wow. And bee pollen.
Bee pollen, too. an amazing superfood just packed with nutrients. And it's thought to be particularly effective for allergies, especially when combined with that raw local honey we talked about.
So the whole hive is basically a pharmacy.
You could definitely see it that way. And what's truly remarkable about honey itself, and really a testament to its inherent purity and stability, is its extraordinary longevity. Archaeologists have discovered intact honey in ancient Egyptian tombs thousands of years old,
It is still edible?
found still perfectly edible 3,000 years later. It demonstrates this unique durability and natural preservation quality that honey has. However, there's a significant warning that comes with this.
Okay.
The wisdom conveyed here is that a huge percentage, maybe 76% of honey you buy at the store, is not even honey in its true beneficial form. Much of it is heavily filtered, extensively heated, basically damaged. This processing results in a product with zero pollen, and it's essentially devoid of its therapeutic properties.
So most supermarket honey isn't the real deal.
That's the claim. The clear advice is actively seek out good, real honey. Look for raw, unfiltered honey from trusted local farmers markets or reputable health food stores. Read the labels carefully.
Got it. Read the labels, buy local if possible.
Right. And there's even one more, maybe more advanced aspect of this bee wisdom, something called bee venom therapy.
Bee venom, like getting stung on purpose.
Well, in a controlled way, yes. It's presented as an original PRP or stem cell therapy, leveraging the therapeutic properties of the venom itself. It's used in some alternative skincare circles, sometimes playfully called nature's Botox, for its regenerative effects. It's also employed in regenerative medicine and, quite notably, for arthritis pain relief. This stems partly from observations that beekeepers, despite their physical labor, often seem to have fewer aches and pains than you might expect.
Interesting. How does that work?
It's viewed as a form of hormetic stress. That's where small, controlled doses of a stressor, in this case, the venom, actually stimulate beneficial biological responses and strengthen the body's natural healing mechanisms. It's a pretty profound example of how nature, when we understand it deeply, can provide really powerful solutions. Okay, let's shift focus now to salt, another substance that's, often attacked in modern dietary advice, yet one that holds immense value in ancient texts and throughout human history.
Yeah, salt gets a bad rap these days.
It really does, but think about it historically. The very term salary, for instance, it originates from Roman soldiers being paid partly in salt. Salarium argentum, that's how valuable it was.
Wow, I didn't know that. Paid in salt.
Yeah, and the idiom, not worth his salt, it directly reflects this historical value, linking a person's performance or worth to this essential mineral. Even profound spiritual metaphors, like Jesus calling his disciples the salt of the earth, directly imply their intrinsic value, their preserving quality, their purpose in the world. And beyond just consumption, salt is also noted in some ancient practices as a great fertilizer, showing its multifaceted importance in sustaining life and growth. This deep historical and cultural embedding is just worlds away from its modern vilification.
It really is. So what about the health benefits? Beyond just flavor.
Well, the wisdom we're exploring here often draws on the work of some pioneering figures, like Dr. Faridun Batman Gelage, maybe not a household name, but influential in certain circles. His books like The Body's Many Cries for Water and The Water and Salt Therapy detail these incredible findings from his time as a political prisoner in Iran. He apparently used just water and unprocessed salt to cure thousands of fellow prisoners from debilitating conditions, things like severe peptic ulcer disease.
Just water and salt.
Just water and salt. It powerfully emphasizes salt's crucial, absolutely undeniable role in fundamental hydration and in providing essential minerals. The contemporary understanding presented here is that many modern health issues, widespread fatigue, brain fog, compromised organ function, might stem from the fact that a huge percentage of people, maybe 70–80%, are chronically dehydrated.
Dehydrated even if they drink water.
Yes, because true hydration isn't just about drinking plain water. It's about getting water plus electrolytes, especially sodium and potassium. These minerals are vital for cellular function, nerve transmission, everything.
Okay, so salt is key for hydration.
Absolutely key. And this perspective, therefore, completely rejects what it terms the ridiculous attack on salt and that prevalent low-fat, low-salt advice that dominated for decades. It calls it nonsense. It argues that those recommendations are based on a misunderstanding of human physiology and the vital role these minerals play. However, the quality of the salt matters immensely.
Right, not just any salt.
Definitely not your standard, highly refined table salt, which is mostly just sodium chloride stripped of everything else, often with anti-caking agents added. This wisdom strongly recommends seeking out multi-mineral salt varieties. Things like unrefined Celtic sea salt, or Himalayan pink salt, or Redmond real salt, or Baja gold. These are often harvested using traditional methods, sometimes from ancient seabeds or specific coastal regions, often in countries that deeply value their food traditions. They preserve a rich spectrum of trace minerals that are essential for robust health.
So look for unrefined, mineral-rich salts.
Exactly. It's a powerful invitation to reconsider salt not as some dietary enemy to be avoided, but as an absolutely essential element for life.
Okay, next up in the medicine cabinet is olive oil. This one feels a bit more familiar maybe as something healthy, but it's presented in these ancient traditions as truly incredible, a profoundly beneficial oil, often regarded as actual medicine in cultures known for longevity, like on the Greek islands.
Yes, and when you dive into the research from this particular perspective, a really compelling assertion emerges. No other oil out there has the medical benefits of extra virgin olive oil. That's a bold statement.
It is. It elevates it beyond just a cooking fat.
Absolutely. It becomes a cornerstone of health. And interestingly, when it comes to cooking with olive oil, something there's often confusion about.
Yeah, the smoke point debate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Recent studies, which actually align quite well with this ancient wisdom, have emerged suggesting that high-quality extra virgin olive oil might actually be the best oil to cook with. This directly challenges those earlier widespread notions about it having a supposed low smoke point that makes it unsuitable for heat.
So the quality is key again.
Paramount. It highlights that the quality and purity of the oil matter far more than just putting all olive oils into one category. A high polyphenol, fresh, extra virgin olive oil behaves differently under heat than a refined, lower quality one. And to identify that truly good quality olive oil, the wisdom suggests using your senses. It should taste green and spicy. You might even feel a peppery catch in the back of your throat.
Okay, green and spicy.
Yes. And crucially, the more bitter it is, the more beneficial it's considered. That bitterness isn't a flaw. It indicates the presence of those powerful antioxidants and polyphenols, like oleocanthal, which have anti-inflammatory effects.
So bitterness is good in this case.
Very good. And this profound connection between olive oil and health is so ingrained in some ancient practices that is even incorporated into things like evening rituals. There are references that link consuming olive oil to receiving spiritual strength or blessing, sometimes quoting texts like Acts 18 about receiving power. It's seen as this tangible way to invite blessings and strength into the body, recognizing its deep, nourishing, and protective qualities. Liquid gold, indeed. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the yes foods, but to connect this to the bigger picture, the ancient wisdom we're exploring also provides what's understood as God's definition of food versus filth. Clear categories.
Food versus filth, that's strong language.
It is. And these distinctions are presented not merely as, religious dogma or arbitrary rules. The argument is that they're based on something like a simple law like gravity, intrinsically tied to the physiological effects these things have on the human body.
So based on biology, not just belief.
That's the assertion. And there's a common modern interpretation of a New Testament scripture, often quoted, that says something like, all food's clean. This is frequently used to dismiss ancient dietary restrictions from the Old Testament. However, this ancient perspective contends that this is a mistranslation or misapplication when applied specifically to dietary restrictions related to animal consumption.
How so?
The argument is straightforward. Our body hasn't changed, meaning the fundamental physiology of humans and animals remains consistent. Therefore, what was physiologically detrimental thousands of years ago based on the nature of the animal remains so today. It urges a deeper look beyond just surface-level interpretations of Scripture.
Okay, so what specific animals fall into this avoid category and why?
Well, the primary physiological reasons offered for avoiding certain animals, like pork and shellfish, are profound and directly linked to their biological roles in the ecosystem. These animals are explicitly called detestable animals in ancient texts like Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14. And this designation, viewed through this lens, is rooted in practical health implications.
Okay, let's start with pork. Why is it on the list?
Pork, from this perspective, is referred to as potentially the greatest carrier of parasites on the planet.
Wow, greatest carrier.
That's the claim. And it's not taken lightly. This wisdom emphasizes that high exposure to parasites through things like undercooked pork is quite shockingly linked to a significant number of chronic illnesses and even cancer cases due to these parasitic co-infections. The pig's digestive system and its natural scavenger behavior make it a potential host for a wide array of organisms, worms, viruses, etc., that, when consumed, can transfer to humans.
Okay, that's a strong argument against pork. What about shellfish?
Similarly, shellfish, including popular items like shrimp, mussels, oysters, clams, lobster, crab, and also bottom-feeding fish like catfish, are described collectively as the dirtiest animal of the sea
Dirtiest? Why?
because they are essentially filter feeders or bottom dwellers. Their ecological role is often to clean the environment. Mussels, for example, filter large volumes of water, concentrating whatever pollutants or pathogens are present. They're actually studied by environmental scientists because they are such good indicators of water toxicity. They literally harbor toxins like heavy metals, microplastics, dioxins. Catfish are classic bottom feeders, consuming waste and detritus that settles on the seabed or riverbed.
So they accumulate environmental toxins.
Exactly. And the emphasis in this ancient wisdom isn't just about adhering to a kosher diet in a purely religious sense. It's presented as being rooted in the principle that a divine power cares for us and provides these fundamental physiological guidelines for maintaining optimal health. Avoiding these specific animals is seen as a crucial part of protecting the human body from a significant burden of toxins, parasites, and pathogens they naturally carry or accumulate. Hashtag handed man-made chemicals and processed foods.
Okay, so that covers specific animals. What about all the stuff in our food today that didn't even exist back then? The chemicals, the additives.
Right. When we look at this ancient dietary wisdom, it becomes immediately clear there's absolutely no biblical template or instruction for the vast array of modern food additives we encounter daily.
Makes sense. They didn't have them.
Exactly. You won't find references to artificial sweeteners, artificial flavors, hydrogenated oils, processed plant oils like canola or soybean oil, MSG, artificial colors.
Yeah.
The list goes on and on. These simply didn't exist. So from this perspective, the guiding principle is stark and really clear. These modern creations are generally to be avoided or discarded because they're man-made and fundamentally chemical in nature, not natural food.
So if God didn't make it, don't eat it. Is that the idea?
That's a very simplified way to put it, but it captures the essence. The overarching directive from this ancient framework is beautifully simple, really. Eat what God created for food, and eat food in a form that is healthy for the body. This means actively and intentionally avoiding processing methods that fundamentally ruin a good food, stripping it of its nutrients, adding harmful chemicals, altering its natural structure in detrimental ways.
So avoid overprocessing.
Yes, it's a call to return to whole, unadulterated foods, prepared in ways that enhance rather than diminish their nutritional value. Think traditional methods. Fermentation, sprouting, simple cooking. It means steering clear of anything that fundamentally alters a food from its original natural state, opting instead for purity and simplicity as the pathway to health. It's a principle that can genuinely simplify our often overwhelming modern food choices, can't it?
It really can. Just stick to real food. Okay, so stepping back a bit, what does all this mean for us today, particularly within communities that draw heavily on this ancient wisdom, like churches? Historically, let's be honest, many Christian gatherings, the potlucks some of us grew up with, maybe especially in the Midwest, were often associated with, well, so much bad food.
Yeah.
Lots of casseroles with processed ingredients, sugary desserts, unhealthy fats.
Oh, yeah. The potluck stereotype is real sometimes. Jell-O salads.
Exactly. But what's truly encouraging, and what this perspective highlights, is that there seems to be a definite, discernible shift occurring now. We're observing a lot more pastors today who are willing to address these topics openly, actively teaching and promoting health and wellness from a holistic, faith-based perspective. It's becoming less taboo.
That's true. You see examples of pastors who are visibly fit and healthy themselves. Maybe people like Craig Groeschel or Stephen Furtick are sometimes mentioned as examples. They visibly embody a commitment to honoring their bodies, and that reflects this growing awareness.
Yeah, leading by example.
Right. Now, while there's certainly still progress to be made, you might, unfortunately, still stumble upon instances of churches offering, ice creams and Cokes at events, kind of missing the connection.
Old habits die hard.
They do. But overall, there's clearly what feels like a revival in the making related to our health, bubbling up within these communities. And this isn't just anecdotal. We're even seeing churches dedicating entire weeks or sermon series specifically to health and nutrition from the pulpit. That represents a monumental shift in priorities, doesn't it? A recognition of the profound connection between faith and physical well-being.
It really does. It signals a deeper commitment to that comprehensive bibliomedicine approach we talked about earlier.
Exactly. And this renewed focus raises an important question. What's driving this change? Why now? Well, one compelling observation is simply looking at the prayer request lists within congregations. They seem to be growing at an alarming rate, filled with petitions for healing from cancer, with dementia, with heart disease, with diabetes, all these chronic lifestyle-related diseases.
That's a sobering thought. The prayer lists reflect our modern health crisis.
They do. And it's prompting a deeper inquiry. There's a story shared about one wise pastor who was grappling with this. He shared a powerful insight. Instead of just praying for people's health problems, he started asking them directly, are you sleeping, eating well, following God's plan for rest? The basic
Like
principles.
holding people accountable in a way.
Gently, yes. If the honest answer was no, his advice was direct but compassionate. Okay, I want to show you the truth about these principles and have you go do it. It emphasizes a crucial tenet of this ancient wisdom, that sometimes we need to just stick to the plan, or in this context, eat by the book. It highlights personal responsibility and active participation as integral parts of the healing journey. It's not always just about passive prayer, it's often prayer in action.
Prayer in action. And sometimes, maybe historically, there's been a reluctance from leadership to address these action steps, right? You hear about pastors maybe avoiding what they perceive as controversial topics, including diet and lifestyle choices, maybe in an effort to not lose members or avoid offense.
That can certainly happen. It's a delicate balance.
But this perspective would argue that this reluctance stands in sharp contrast to figures like Jesus and the apostles, who, by their very teachings and actions, were often very controversial in their time, yet profoundly impactful. This viewpoint suggests that the church, far from shying away from these topics, should actually be at the forefront of addressing these incredibly relevant health issues today. That true leadership involves guiding communities toward holistic well-being, body, mind, and spirit, even when it means challenging comfortable norms or habits. #tag the Bible as the ultimate guide for life.
Exactly. And that leadership extends beyond just diet and physical health in the narrow sense. This wisdom tradition presents the Bible as the ultimate guide for living your best life possible, holistically.
Not just spiritual life, but practical life.
Absolutely. This isn't limited to spiritual matters. It extends profoundly into practical aspects of daily existence. For instance, it's presented as offering principles for successfully running a business. You see contemporary figures, maybe like Dave Ramsey is often cited, drawing extensively on biblical wisdom for financial principles. Specific verses, like Ecclesiastes 11.2, the one advising to invest in 7 ventures, yes, 8, are interpreted as direct blueprints for smart financial stewardship, diversification, and entrepreneurship.
Diversify your investments, yeah.
Right. It's seen as a comprehensive guide for achieving wealth responsibly, for fostering strong and enduring relationships, for parenting effectively, and ultimately for having a significant and positive impact on the world around you. It's a truly holistic view of human flourishing.
That's a much broader application than people might typically think.
It really is. This ancient wisdom is viewed as an amazing source for marriage, for raising children, and yes, for business. I remember hearing a personal anecdote related to this about someone seeking guidance on business investments while actually walking barefoot, praying and listening to these texts. And right at that moment, they encountered Ecclesiastes 11.2. Invest in 7 ventures, yes, 8. It was received as this direct, profound answer, offering a filter for their investment decisions.
Wow.
And we know that many parables attributed to Jesus, like the parable of the talents or the minas, are just replete with powerful lessons about wise investing, risk, return, and entrepreneurship. So the point is, these ancient texts aren't just for Sunday mornings. They're presented as offering profound practical wisdom that proponents believe can be applied to virtually every area of modern life, offering surprising depth of counsel if you look for it. #, healing secrets and longevity.
Okay, so this expansive wisdom then extends deeply and powerfully into the realm of profound physical healing as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. The principles found within these ancient texts are presented by advocates as being capable of helping individuals achieve remarkable things like beat cancer, reverse autoimmune disease, heal your gut, and balance your hormones.
Those are huge claims. Beating cancer, reversing autoimmunity.
They are huge claims, and they're not presented as just vague promises. They represent what proponents see as a complete, actionable framework for achieving remarkable levels of wellness and recovery from chronic conditions, directly challenging what many in conventional medicine might consider impossible.
So how does it work? What are these secrets?
Well, it's compelling to consider the idea that maybe the original biohackers were in the Bible.
Biohackers in the Bible.
Yeah, in the sense that they didn't have to hack anything. They followed a simple plan that is thousands of years old. This framework connects ancient practices with things we're rediscovering now. For instance, heliotherapy, using sunlight for healing. That's highlighted, inspired perhaps by the work of 20th century pioneers like Dr. Auguste Rollier or Paul Bragg, whose work on sun exposure resonates with this ancient understanding of natural light's healing power.
Sunlight as medicine.
Right. And then there's the practice of grounding, or earthing, connecting directly with the Earth's surface, walking barefoot. And the concept of hormetic stress we mentioned with bee venom. That applies here too, controlled exposure to beneficial stressors like using a sauna or taking cold plunges. These practices, whether explicitly detailed or implicitly present in ancient lifestyles, are understood to stimulate beneficial biological responses and strengthen the body's resilience.
So it's about aligning with these natural principles.
Exactly. And many individuals, including the authors of some of the source material inspiring these ideas, share their own detailed blueprints for healing from what they describe as life-threatening and terminal illness. And they attribute their recovery entirely to discovering, embracing, and rigorously following what they understand as God's plan for health.
That's powerful testimony.
It is, and from this perspective, there's a deep conviction, often born from personal experience, that a divine plan exists specifically to heal things like cancer. Having experienced or observed this firsthand, it's sometimes even suggested that cancer, when approached naturally, on a physical sense, is less difficult to fight naturally than MS or rheumatoid arthritis, or even Crohn's and ulcerative colitis.
Less difficult than autoimmune diseases. That's counterintuitive.
It is counterintuitive.
Yeah.
And this particular viewpoint sometimes extends to suggesting a potential spiritual or even demonic aspect to cancer, implying its origins might not be purely physical, but could involve deeper, unseen forces, which naturally informs a very holistic approach to healing it.
So what does that holistic approach look like?
Well, the biblical healing protocol, as understood and applied here, aims to combine spiritual practices, things like prayer, meditation, praise, maybe the laying on of hands as mentioned in the book of James. Integrating these spiritual components with carefully selected modern or natural therapies, perhaps 5E nutrient therapy, hyperbaric oxygen, or therapies aimed at activating the body's own natural killer, NK cells, which are crucial for fighting disease. The combination of the spiritual and the physical, the ancient and the modern, is presented as offering the best shot of complete healing. #tag miracles and principles. Ultimately, the wisdom we've explored posits that the divine power operates as a God of order, a God of principles, and a God of miracles. It's not necessarily one or the other.
Order, principles, and miracles.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Following what is described as God's plan for health, eating the right foods, avoiding the wrong ones, getting rest, sunlight, etc., is likened to obeying a fundamental law, like the law of gravity. Breaking that law, ignoring those principles, regardless of your personal faith or belief system, is understood to have predictable and often inescapable negative consequences for your physical body.
So the principles work whether you believe in the source or not.
That's the idea. The principles themselves have inherent effects. And interestingly, in many experiences aligned with this framework, it's suggested that more miracles happen in a process than instantaneously. Meaning, healing often unfolds over time as someone consistently applies these principles, rather than always being a sudden dramatic event. This encourages patience, persistence, and adherence to the outlined plan.
Process over instantaneous fixes. That resonates. So this brings us to a really compelling final thought, doesn't it? Even if you, listening right now, don't personally subscribe to a belief in a divine entity or these specific ancient texts, if you aspire to live long, master metabolism, reduce pain, fight depression, and conquer cancer, and you feel like nothing else you've tried has truly worked,
Well, maybe.
then perhaps, just perhaps, exploring these ancient principles distilled simply as eating real food, avoiding certain detrimental things, embracing natural elements like sun and earth, maybe choosing to eat by the book, in this sense, might offer a new pathway forward.
It's a pragmatic approach too, isn't it?
Yeah.
The underlying belief shared here is that this higher power is often seen as a God of action, not just abstract concepts, and that these health principles are universally applicable because they align with how our bodies are designed.
And there was that anecdote you mentioned.
Right. There's even a powerful anecdote sometimes shared within this wisdom tradition about someone identifying as an atheist whose son experienced remarkable healing by diligently following this very specific biblical health plan. It really underscores the idea that the efficacy might lie in the principles themselves and the tangible results they produce, potentially independent of requiring a pre-existing belief system to activate them. It's about what works for the human body. #tag outro.
So, what does this all mean for you listening today? We've journeyed through a pretty profound body of ancient wisdom, haven't we? Uncovering what's presented as a powerful, often overlooked blueprint for health. From really distinguishing between types of dairy, understanding ancient forms of bread and red meat as vital, potentially healing foods, to recognizing the incredible medicinal properties attributed to honey, salt, and olive oil. We've seen how truly radical and, proponents argue, incredibly effective these age-old insights can be. It's definitely an invitation to reconsider our relationship with food, maybe challenge some long-held assumptions.
Yeah, and to connect this to the bigger picture, in a world that so often dismisses age-old practices, maybe favoring only the latest scientific discoveries, this deep dive has revealed that fundamental principles for physical and, some would argue, spiritual well-being have, from this particular perspective, been guiding humanity for millennia. This exploration into a Biblio Diet isn't just about a food list. It's really about potentially reclaiming a holistic approach to life, one that proponents believe was designed for vitality, resilience, and profound healing. It offers a compelling counter-narrative to many of our modern health challenges.
Absolutely. And here's where it gets really interesting to ponder as we wrap up. A final thought for you to chew on. Considering the drastic, undeniable changes in our modern food supply, the processing, the chemicals, the genetic modifications, the sheer proliferation of countless man-made ingredients. If those ancient lawgivers, figures like Moses, were hypothetically here today, and they were tasked with issuing new dietary guidelines for our current world, what additional strictures, what new warnings do you think they might introduce beyond just what's already laid out in texts like Leviticus and Deuteronomy?
That's a fascinating question.
Right. What artificial sweeteners, what specific industrial processes, or what modern food creations do you imagine would make their detestable list today? High fructose corn syrup, artificial colors, trans fats, something to truly chew on as you consider your next meal and the choices that are right there in